little badass. Book badass. You little badass. You little badass. Book club badass. Welcome to the show.
All right, welcome.
Okay, well, welcome to Bad Ass Bookclub Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I feel, obligated to let you know that I am one of your hosts, Ashley.
And I'm Katie.
And this is Katie.
Which camera do we look into?
Well,
Perfect.
we look to each other as we have been for 30 years, which brings me in to my point of why we are here. We have been literate for as long as we've known each other, and that qualifies us to talk about books together.
I even think my mom might have helped with that.
Your aunt as well, okay? And now look at you teaching the bright, bright future of America. But that's another podcast. So let's get into it.
Yeah, okay, I love it. I think it's really important to say first, though, that the whole concept behind this is that it's great to be able to talk about books and to have an opinion. And everyone's opinion is important, but we don't need to argue. You know what I mean? Or fight. We will disagree. Like, I'm cool with us disagreeing. I like positive disagreement. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And I think that is why we are the right people for this job, because we're not going to agree. And we are going to disagree so well. You'll find out what that means. I can't wait.
I can't wait either. And if you are our loyal, amazing listeners, as you start this journey with us, it's completely normal for you to hear us say something and be like, well, that's dumb.
I'm glad you touched on that, Katie, because a lot of it, you might feel that way, but we're not here to be super serious. We're just here to be two friends who read a book together so we can spend time together with you guys as well.
Yeah, so this is a place for everybody, but the haters. Like, if you're going to hate on this, then this isn't for you.
Or if you're going to hate on it, but you're going to watch it all the way through, maybe it is for you. Just don't comment. And when we get to this point, leave 5 stars.
Exactly.
I think that's a
I
good
think
place
this is
to
a
start.
strong start.
Yeah,
This is a
I think so
strong
too.
Start. Welcome. You're a badass. And let's talk about some badass books.
Okay, well,
What'd you read? What have you been into?
I, for one, have been reading a lot. And by reading a lot, I mean I read like 8 books in January. We're in March, but that's not important. So what I would like to talk about first is my favorite book of the read, Strange Sally Diamond. Now, this is by Liz Nugent, and let me just start out by saying she's Irish. I know.
Relevant.
I did do a little research on that because I was going to come here and say, I'll be honest, that I enjoy reading books by authors who are from the UK. And then I thought, you know what? There's a tricky pass there with Ireland and the UK.
Oh,
so I
yeah.
didn't want to just put her in that category. It's good. I know she's not English. She's Irish.
But like,
That's a good clarification.
What's the reason for that, though?
What's the reason for the war in Ireland? I think that's a different podcast. But what I will say is
that you like stories from UK authors.
Oh, I'm glad you're here to ask the important questions.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is Strange Sally Diamond is the perfect example. They are on a grassy knoll. They are having a picnic. They're just the scene building of the, I would say English, but in this case, Irish countryside blows my mind because it starts out with a spring picnic that you want to be there for. And it turns out, well, guess what? Her dad was actually a serial killer who kidnapped a young girl. And that's how Sally came to be. So it's just the twists and
Surprise.
the turns. Yeah, exactly. It reminds me a lot of like a TV show, a murder series you're going to want to see. But reading it, you can envision it and you can, do the cinematography for yourself, which is why I love these books. They're any sort of thriller that happens just like in a warm setting. You start out, everything's hunky-dory, and then you take a dark turn, but not too dark. We're not getting graphic. We're not having explicit sex scenes described, Not in this book. So anyway, Strange Sally Diamond, I'll just give a really quick summary because if you do decide that you want to read it and come back and hear my thoughts, I don't want to give the twists and turns away, but it is about this girl who finds out that she comes from a troubled childhood. She's actually adopted by the psychiatrists who are put on her mother's case when she is found.
Okay.
She had been abducted and kidnapped and held hostage, I would say, for years.
So how much of that do you know at the beginning of the story? Like, how old is she
So,
when it starts?
Strange Sally herself is an adult when the book starts, but she hasn't had a lot of life experience. So a lot of her perspective does feel like it's coming from not a child, but maybe somebody like later in adolescence. And the setup is really just that she's living normal to her life because she's got her adoptive parents in the picture already. We don't, and Sally doesn't find out where she's come from until the middle of the book.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it kind of like builds.
It does. It builds. She's learning the story as we're learning it. So that's an interesting perspective. Basically, her adoptive parents end up dying, and they leave all the research that she was like her adoptive dad's sort of like case study. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics for that.
She's thinking about her own family life, like growing up, like what did this relationship mean?
She actually learns about where she came from and about her biological parents through reading case notes from her adopted dad.
Whoa.
So it's pretty tricky. And there's some like neurodivergence on her end too, which actually really helps with the storytelling because there's a lot of just like fact and not as much emotion when you're learning about the different things that went on. And then there's a whole subplot because, I don't know, are we doing spoilers or are we just letting it all out?
Well, so here's the thing, everybody. This is our first podcast. So you might have stumbled upon this, or we know you and we said, please listen to us. And because we're not desperate.
Thanks.
Yeah. No, just
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for being here. So these books are already read.
Right.
So it's kind of like if you want a little bit of a synopsis to get excited, maybe it's interesting to you. So maybe not like the end spoilers, but like little tidbits like, ooh, that's exciting. Because we have to know about, like, I'm still going to want to read this book.
Right.
I haven't.
I'm just going to say one thing because the entire other half of the book is from this person's perspective. It's not a complete spoiler. I'm going to let it out. She has a sibling.
Ooh.
And that sibling was actually raised by the kidnapper father. So we've got this girl who made it out, who ends up with pretty functioning adoptive parents and her story. And then we've got her older brother who is actually raised by the person who kidnapped their mother. So they take two different paths. They do end up coming together at some point. There's a lot of twists and turns.
So wait, is the person that kidnapped the mom the actual biological dad?
Yes. So you learn pretty quickly in the book that there was Sally's mom who was kidnapped as a child. And it's just one of these typical like room scenarios. Mm-hmm. She's in a room in the house. She never gets to leave. He wants to start a family and at different points ends up having two kids with this poor kidnapped person. And at some point, something happens to where they all have to end up leaving the house, which ends up in the mom and Sally being freed in a way. And then he takes the son, the older brother.
Because it is his son.
Because it is his son. And they escape and start a new life somewhere else. And we learn through Sally's perspective as well as her brother's perspective, these two different paths that end up taking place after this man's sick plan is ruined.
Okay, so I'm intrigued.
Yes.
First of all, I'm intrigued. I think this is levels upon levels that I could dig into. But why'd you find it? Like, where was this?
Okay, so Liz Nugent has written a few different books that I haven't read yet, but I was on a real kick, like I said, in January. So I was reading a lot of different thrillers. I do listen to a couple other book club podcasts, coincidentally, and this was one of their picks from like 2024 that I had never read. So when it came across my desk again, I thought, oh my gosh, I've heard of this book. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go ahead and read it. At that point, too, my standards weren't really high, and that's how you find a gem. These books, too, they're not that long. I think Strange Sally Diamond's somewhere like in the maybe 400. So it's not like this long novel. You can get through a lot of them. But this particular one is the one that stuck with me. And that's why I wanted to talk about it.
I like that you said, though, that you weren't like, your expectations weren't really high on it.
Exactly.
So it was just a thriller that came across your path and you're like, I'm going to pick it up.
Yeah.
Do you feel, in the essence of a thriller, were you thrilled? Like, was there suspense in there?
Yeah, it's like more of a mystery. They do classify it as a thriller, but no, there were some thrilling parts now that I'm thinking back.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a thriller.
Okay, awesome. Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, it was good. I don't want to give too much away, but I would encourage, if you like something that's a little dark, I mean, obviously the plot there is dark,
Right.
but it doesn't get too graphic about the details. I mean, clearly it could have gone in a whole different direction with what went on in those rooms and, with the mom and everything like that. It's an awful story. However, you don't have to have a real strong stomach for the yucky stuff.
So it's more like a PG-13.
I would say it's like a PG-13, but like B-14,
Newfangled language.
Yeah.
These rating skills.
Yeah. So
Ooh.
anyway, that's my take on Strange Sally Diamond. And I do want to say one more thing. There are other characters. She builds a whole community. It's also a coming of age story for Sally. There's just a lot. There's really a lot. There's some really happy times that happen in it.
Mm-hmm.
She makes friends. She has to start fending for herself. She's never really been on her own, and she really becomes a woman in the story, and not in that way.
Well,
yeah. So anyway, that's enough about Sally.
I don't know. Silly Sally.
Yeah.
Strange Sally.
Yeah.
I'm kind of into it. I want to pick it up. If you were to say, like, can you get it anywhere?
You can definitely get it anywhere. I personally read a lot of Kindle, through Kindle. So they have a subscription, Kindle Unlimited. She happens to be one of those. So it's free to Kindle users. This is obviously not an ad yet, but that is how I come across a lot of my reading.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so I did, one other thing came up when you were talking about it. So obviously she's a lady. She's a woman.
She's an adult.
She's an adult woman.
Yes.
She's an adult lady woman.
Yes.
And there's a brother perspective in there at some point too. Mm-hmm. For me, I really like being able to identify with the character and just kind of like jump in where they're at. Do you think that being like, do you have to be a girl to really enjoy this, or does it just make it more relevant?
I would say because it starts out from her perspective, the thing is like, how much are you going to relate to a person whose mom was essentially, raped, and then she was adopted by a psychiatrist? So to really get into her shoes.
And we're not shaming anybody who's had like a past.
No, of course not.
But
it's
rare.
What I'm thinking is you can be anybody and dive in because of the writing. The writing is really descriptive, and the writing really develops the characters, not just Sally, but her friend she meets, her brother. And you get a little bit from her awful, awful, awful dad. She would never call him the biological person who made Sally. I think anyone could read it as long as you're okay with that whole initial plot, which if you're here, you'll learn. You probably will be.
Badass books.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I like it. I'm into it. What's the author's name again?
Liz Nugent.
Okay.
From Ireland.
Silly Sally. Strange little Sally girl.
Strange Sally Diamond.
Okay. Liz Nugent.
Liz Nugent.
Would you read her again?
Yeah, I would. I would look for another book from her because she has a couple out. But now that I know she's good at writing, I'll give her a chance on something else. But this is the one that I've actually heard people talking about, so it was a good one to start with.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Let me just take a sip of my coffee.
Oh, please do.
My Dolly Parton one.
Yes.
Because Dolly Parton's a badass, right?
Oh, I think she's the badass.
100%. She also has a literary program online. It's called like Imagination something. Yeah, Google Dolly Parton because she donates millions of books to children.
Wow, I wouldn't expect anything less.
I mean, come on.
And you know what? A moment of silence for Dolly because her husband passed away. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. Dolly is fine. Okay, guys, this took a turn. But she is going through it because her husband of many, many years passed away like in the last week. And I've been feeling for her. So that's all.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, sorry. Didn't mean to scare anybody. Dolly is alive and well.
Let's hope. Well, I wouldn't say she's well.
Okay, not this week.
But all right, Ashley, are you ready for mine?
Okay. What we've all been waiting for, folks.
I hope they don't block us for that.
Okay, you're allowed to go 15 seconds. Cumulatively, okay.
Okay, so about the time that I met you, shortly after, I should say, first grade, huge Jurassic Park fan. Was that a little bit of a, Easter egg for what's to come later in our podcast? Maybe. But I'm a huge fan. And I don't know if you could tell.
I'm just really excited
Did
for
see
you.
my t-shirt?
Yeah, okay, guys. I didn't want to interrupt her, but can we just take a moment for the Jeff that's Jeffing?
And there's a reason here. Because this book is really good, but I was a geek for the movie. Like, if you grow up watching the movie religiously, or not religiously, like, let's just say it was a moment in cinematic history, the book's very different, actually.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, so this is, as an adult, I decided, you know what? I would like to go back and see what the story was like, because the movie was so good to me and such a believable part, especially this day and age, with advances in technology. I mean, I think this is something that a lot of people, the concept of Jurassic Park, I mean, I hope everybody listening to this podcast knows what Jurassic Park is.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So I'll just get to it. The book has more science in it. Like, there's a lot of science that's there for us geeks. And the author, Michael Crichton, so I should have said that. Michael Crichton, he does a really good job building a story. And as you can tell, this is thick.
It's a big one.
It's a big one. It's a beefy little boy.
I like it.
What I like about it is that there are so many other scenes that happen in the book that aren't in the movie.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it's kind of like if you were to read the book and then as a screenplay writer, you're going, okay, without going back into the book, what stood out to me, I'm going to write a movie based off of that.
Okay, the highlights.
Yeah, kind of. But they even changed some of the highlights.
Oh, okay.
So I had a Ford Explorer, as you know, and I was pretty proud of it because in the movie there's Ford Explorers, and I was kind of feeling like I was a little Jurassic Parky, right?
A connection. I like that.
Yeah, it's Toyotas in the book.
I have a Toyota.
So I know it's an insignificant detail, but when you're going through it, you're like, oh my gosh, well, that makes sense. Marketing, whatever, was the reason at the time they
what
did
you
it.
mean. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so Michael Crichton, he does so many different details, but the characters are very different for the most part, with a few exceptions.
Oh!
Once you see Goldblum in his role as Ian Malcolm, nothing, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. Can you tell?
We all are.
And yeah, if anyone's listening to the podcast, I'm wearing his face on my body right
and
now.
It's not just any picture. It's a nice, young, fresh.
Oh, yeah.
He aged well. Don't get me wrong. But this, you should just get to the YouTube or wherever.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so once you see his character, it's very believable. I don't know. I'd be curious to go back and know if he read the book before getting his role. He just brings this vibe to it that's hard to get away from in the book. Does that make sense?
It does. I don't want to speak for Jeff, but something tells me if he hadn't, once he, was interested in the role, I bet he read it.
I mean, he's a smart dude.
We should write him an email.
Or just watch this.
Okay.
Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
So he's a character that's very similar. I would also say that Samuel Jackson's character, hold on to your butts. Except for he's developed much more in the book.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, he's pretty brilliant. His role seems more significant. Full transparency, I did not watch the movie again after reading it because even though certain things stuck out in my mind, I didn't want to start bleeding the two together, bending those realities. But just having seen it so many times in my life and then reading the book, it was like, oh, well, that's different. So anybody interested in actually going into it, or let's say you read it way back when and then you saw the movies, I suggest getting back into it, but you have to let the movie go.
Okay.
You really have to let the movie go.
Okay.
There's some really neat science. I do appreciate Ian Malcolm's perspective. He gets a little annoying, but he's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
But how the park is imagined in the book is so much larger. And it doesn't even really start on the island.
Okay, that is a question I was wondering
I
about
mean,
the setting.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting because there's something that happens. This isn't so much a spoiler. There's basically some of the little dinosaurs have migrated
Oh.
and they start attacking children in another town.
Oh, no.
And no one's thinking like, oh, this is an actual dinosaur.
Right.
And so it kind of builds the layers that way. I will say Ellie Stratter, I think, is way hotter in the book
Okay.
than what she was portrayed as.
Okay.
No beef with the character, no beef with the actress. But she's also pretty smart in this book.
Okay.
There are a couple scenes too where it's almost like they took different pieces and they go, okay, I'm going to put these together in this scene, but I'm going to change it because this feels better for an audience watching it.
Mm-hmm.
And something I can't get over, or was very hard for me to get over, which is why I say you have to like leave the movie alone, is the kids are different. Their age and like personality is a little different. Like the girl isn't so much, this kind of shy, goofy girl.
Right.
She's kind of this annoying little brat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
And somebody
okay.
else might get a different vibe off of it, but Michael Crichton did a really good job of kind of making her so young where she doesn't really get that
There's
she needs to be
danger
quiet.
here.
Yeah.
Okay.
but then she does, and then she's like,
Are you
kind
ever
of
just
this.
kind of like, hey, Raptor,
yeah.
come grab her,
Oh,
please?
100%.
Okay.
Like I almost there's this point too. We all know the scene where the T-Rex is like on top of the car and the kids are screaming.
Sure.
It's set up differently in the movie. There's a few other characters that are involved differently. The lawyer is different too. I mean, a little similar, but mostly different.
Okay.
And you're led to believe that the little girl is dying.
Oh.
Like that she's, getting tore up.
Sure.
But then she's not.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then were you disappointed?
A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. A little bit. It's one of those things where, oh man. And then the mastermind behind it all, like Hammond, right?
Yes.
The old man.
Sure.
He kind of seems like this kind of quirky, lovable grandpa in the movie, right?
Right.
Like he has a bogus idea in the movie, but he makes it out, right? With
Right.
his cane, and then
Yeah.
like the grandkids like hug him and
Yeah.
stuff. He is not exactly that way in the book.
Oh.
Like they do a good job, I think, of his quirkiness.
Okay.
They try to a little bit. And it was interesting because my brother Jim, if you're listening to this, Jim, thank you. He sent me this Instagram where it was this conversation about how when Hammond goes to Grant at the dig site, right, to
Mhm.
get him to come,
Mm-hmm.
he goes in, gets their champagne, pops the champagne,
Right.
and even though they're champagne glasses, he grabs like whiskey glasses or regular glasses or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, is this a mistake in the movie? And when you learn about his character in this, his character is strange
Okay.
and kind of, and it has those quirks, So
Sure,
it's like,
sure.
no, I almost wonder if they did that on purpose because he's so excitable. He is almost like this little kid with this idea, and he has a crap ton of money.
Right.
So, like a lot of people who get good ideas that they're excited about, who have a crap ton of money, they sometimes don't think about like the consequences.
Right. Or maybe even the like little details.
Oh, there are so many details. So let's get into that.
Woo!
Yeah. So woo. Okay. Woohoo. His character I think is well built. I'm not going to say whether he survives or not. He doesn't. So spoiler alert. It's they selected different things for that, but when they talk about the development of the DNA, because they do that more in the book, they talk more about the different kinds of DNA that were chosen.
Okay.
And let's just say it wasn't so much of how at the end of the movie, Dr. Grant realizes miraculously that these animals are, what's it called when you make more babies?
Reproducing.
Thank you. Yeah.
I said it nice and slow so I would get it right.
Thanks, Ashley. Reproducing
Yes.
in the wild naturally by themselves.
Okay.
It goes more into that's kind of how they figure out that they've got a problem on the island.
Mm.
And it's the cool geek in you might like this part. So instead of it just being like Ian Malcolm says one thing and then all of a sudden he's a genius, the reason why he gets a little annoying is because the whole island kind of starts to fall apart, and it goes along with his theories. And so like there are different chapters in the books with the names of the characters, but the sections of the books are iterations of the DNA sequence.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So it's like, or not just not DNA sequence. I apologize, but the chaos theory.
Oh.
Okay. So like how one thing would trigger something,
Sure.
and then it starts to expand, and there's little doodles in here, but there's even like way more charts, and the island just seems bigger. Now, this thick boy right here.
Yeah.
How do you put that into 2 hours of cinematic beauty?
No, totally. And even just it's sounding like your description. First of all, I want to read Jurassic Park and admittedly, embarrassingly, all of the subsequent ones in the series.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of. Don't get me started on what they have going on Netflix right now that Nathan's into, but it's Jurassic Park related. But anyway, just having the graphs, it seems like it was written in such a way to experience that now I can see why we also need to separate it from the movie so
Right.
much. Like this is its own lived thing. Like there are pictures.
Oh yeah. Well, and so to your okay, so the sequels. We
Okay, yeah, that's
sequels.
another story.
But that's what's interesting is as you're reading the book, if you have watched some of the sequels, you go, oh, that's from the first book. So it's almost like they were very selective, and they were like, well, but we like that scene, so we're going to put it into a different movie.
There's so much there.
There really is. The only disappointing part, and I don't know if they just couldn't do it. Spielberg's amazing. Thank you, Spielberg. But I grew up loving Triceratops because of the scene where they're like playing and then like, and the breathing. And it's not a Triceratops in the book.
Oh.
Spoiler alert, Stegosaurus.
Well, that changes things.
Well, kind of, but at the same time, I think I would have also enjoyed watching that.
Okay, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But there's a lot more dinosaur in there, like loving the dinosaur, and this interesting concept. So I'm just I'll bring it to your perspective because I want to know kind of maybe your thought on this. But there's this perspective that kind of is this undertone, okay, of yes, this idea, like when you watch the movie, making dinosaurs plausible, you get the DNA and it works.
Right.
But in the book, they talk about it works because we think it worked. Nobody was alive when the dinosaurs were alive. And so when you take different DNA to kind of fill in,
those gaps or whatever.
But we're filling it in how we think it's supposed to be, like reptilian instead of, and using amphibian instead of,
chicken?
Exactly.
Okay.
Then we get an idea of what we think. And then they also talk about how you are bringing these animals that were adapted to more oxygen in the air, different diseases, different and you really get this idea of when you try to control so much, you really have no control at all.
Sure. Oh, I like that. Honestly, make that the movie.
Okay. Last thing I'm going to say about it. It's gorier. There is more like blood and death. I mean, not a lot. Okay. So if you're like, not
if
into
dinosaurs are involved.
Right. And yeah, that happened a little bit in the movie, but you get it way more in the book. And so when you think about it, they had to make certain choices in the movie, right? You easily could have made it more like an alien, like a Ripley. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like you could have easily had more dinosaurs in it because it seems like there's more dinosaurs on this island. And you could have had more oh, where'd Scotty go? And then he's gone,
Right.
That's not a character in the book, but
Yeah.
But then it almost would have been, I think, too much of a fantasy for people to actually believe. So once again, I think Spielberg, the playwriters or the screenwriters, they did an excellent job pulling from it. But I really just think this was the inspiration.
Okay. Well, I'm actually really intrigued, and I really am going to read it because just that whole philosophical, we're creating what we think we should be
Mhm.
creating, but like maybe we're just creating something totally different. Like it's giving like, when you try to make an ecosystem in a little jar or something and you're
Yes.
like, okay, that'd be cool, but like there's actually all this other stuff that's going on. So
Yes.
it's not really accurate.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm like the science behind it. I love it.
Yeah.
I want to read.
It's a total geek grab. I'm
Okay.
gonna call it geek grab. If I were to do snaps, I do like 5 out of 5.
Ooh, 5 out of 5 snaps. By the way, I didn't give Sally any snaps. I think because I did do a little rating system on my Instagram when I was doing a binge read.
I love this.
I think she got like a 4.2 snaps out of 5, which is pretty good.
Okay.
But that was a side note. I do have a question. Do we know, are there other books?
Yes.
Like,
So
is there a book series?
it's interesting because he did come out with Jurassic World, I believe, and
Oh,
also
okay.
what a trip! 25th anniversary.
I was
edition.
that was catching my eye. Wow.
Yeah, look at that.
Wow.
Can you see that?
I can. And I feel like that
It's
even it's probably like by 30 now.
Yeah. Shh, it is.
Okay.
It actually is.
Okay.
So they do, but okay. You could read the back of the book and
Okay.
Ian Malcolm is in Jurassic World.
Right.
Let's just say there are some characters who at the end of the movie are alive and in the book, they're not.
Okay.
Also, full circle, Grandpa doesn't care about his kids as much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Noted.
Yep.
Okay. Well, he has all these little bony, scaly kids to worry about. And also,
Interesting.
too, okay, it's been a while for me. The island in the movie
Mm-hmm.
was uninhabited by people,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And now you're saying that someone thought it was a good idea in the book to reintroduce these species on an inhabited island?
Well, okay, so
Or is
that's
that like
where
the workers' families?
I probably should clarify. Workers get injured,
Okay.
but they keep it all very hush hush.
Oh, okay.
So my understanding, and anybody who read this and got a different perspective, I also have a short attention span, so I had to reread a couple parts.
Totally. And this is not like that important of a question. That's something that caught my ear. There were kids that were getting
So
eaten.
it's very much like on an island, and it's very much secluded. And the other thing is they talk about the safety systems and the ideas that they put in place, right? Because once again, they imagine what these dinosaurs should be able to do. Right?
Mhm,
And so they
mhm.
create a system to keep them contained, which is with what they think, but they've never actually had a dinosaur.
You did mention migration.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the interesting thing, not all of the dinosaurs have technically gotten off, but there's like the specific small type that somehow ends up in a village and is eating babies out of the cribs.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So there's that.
Gotcha.
You know what I
gotcha.
mean? So there's a little bit more of that
Totally.
kind of gore, and that's the beginning of it. You're not immediately on the island. You're kind of a part of this community that's thinks that there's monsters or do you know what I mean? There's some sort of evil thing
Sure.
that's killing babies in cribs.
Sure.
And then so somebody gets one of these bodies, and that's when it starts to be they try to forensics, right? So forensics is well, this isn't an animal or something that we know.
Right.
This almost seems like it could be this related. You know what I mean? And so
Sure.
then they're but that's impossible.
Right.
The only way it would be possible is if somebody was making dinosaurs. They don't say that, but that's what they make you believe.
Right.
So that's when it kind of starts.
Okay.
And that ties Grant because he knows bones. And so there were a couple people working on the forensics of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
But Grant also did have money from Hammond in one of his organizations in exchange for his knowledge of animals. He didn't know that Hammond was doing this and that. He's the sneaky, smart old man who's
pulling the strings.
yeah.
Okay. Well, this is very intriguing. I want the book. And now I'm just even more okay, Jurassic Park the movie, thanks for what you gave to us. But
Oh, yeah. Different. You really have to go in there being okay, this is going to be a different experience.
Yeah.
It is a little bit thick on some of the, science and story where you might get a little tired.
Okay.
But I think it's worth the read.
sometimes what I like to do is I'll have like a shorter book that's a little more fun, like one of these thrillers or whatever. And that's just like my go to bed every night or like wasting some time throughout the day, like as opposed to maybe putting on reality TV or something like that. Not that I don't do that, but I do. This strikes me as a book that for me personally, I'm going to maybe take a couple months to read and just get through a little bit at a time because it's an actually interesting story.
And then some of the parts, though, they do ramp up a little bit. And there's some scenes that are thrilling. I mean, there are some thrilling parts in it. And had you not seen the movie, you would go, oh, this concept is really, really suspenseful.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm so glad you said that because I was thinking about that. I love reading also. And I'm a book jumper. If I don't know who else out there is a book jumper, that's kind of what we do in this podcast, to be honest.
Yeah.
We're just going to talk about a lot of books because we love them. Badass books.
Yeah. And something about me too is I'm to the point, if I pick up a book and I'm not like super intrigued, unless it's a recommendation, of course, like I'll give it time if somebody's actually read it and recommended it. But if I'm just like looking for something to read and I'm not intrigued and it's just, maybe I'm just not in the mood for that, I have no obligation to keep going. I don't have time for that.
I mean, I think that's the cool part about being an adult.
Right?
Like in high school, it was always like, you have to read this. This is the perspective. It was always so led. And honestly, it took me a while to get back to literature.
Yeah.
Because I was burnt out. I was freaking burnt out. And when I think about TV, like, how many shows are you watching at any one given point? Like, how many shows you got right now?
Well, I'm an isolated case, but even as an isolated case, it's still like over 5. I mean,
right?
You know, yeah.
And then like some start, some end. You get excited about a story. You might have to go back and read a few pages. I mean, watch a few episodes.
Right.
But to your point, there's always those shows where you start and you're like, I can't. I'm not. It's not working for me. And
Yeah.
So why can't you do that with a book?
Exactly. And you might even come back to it at another season, you know?
So, Ashley, if you start this and you put it down, I'm not going to be offended.
No, but I really do want to start it because I am such a lover of the movies. I have this conversation. Matt, please watch, and shout out to a friend who also loves the movies. It was just like a big topic of our friendship. And now I can't wait to be like, okay, hey, pick up this book.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I actually thought about my mom because, like, this is, you know, more of like when my mom was.
Yikes.
Yeah, but you had these great authors, and there's plenty of great authors now. But just like how nothing's stopping you from going and watching a movie that was made before your time,
Right.
like, why not grab books?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many books that, I mean, look at Shakespeare. How many times does our society have to read Romeo and Juliet?
Forced, in fact.
Oh my God, it's been forced upon us.
No, it's such a good point because as I was in my thriller era, I was really close, and I still will do it at some point, maybe next time actually, I don't know, but I want to read some Stephen King.
Yes.
Because it's like, I haven't, and I've seen so many whatever movies, TV shows that are based on his work. He's the original. I don't know, you know, if anybody's got anything bad to say about him, sorry, whatever. We know he's good at what he does. I have a feeling he's a good guy too, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, so that's something that's been intriguing to me too. So I think I'm going to jump on that train shortly.
I think it's interesting too because I think movies, yes, there is a lot of stuff in here that was dated, but is this a sci-fi? Like, would you consider it a sci-fi or a thriller or suspense?
I mean, all of the above, I guess.
Right.
To me right now, and it's just because I've read so many, thriller and mystery is always just like murder, like man on man crime, not always like man on dinosaur on man crime.
Okay.
But if you think about it, man created the dinosaur in this case. So,
and then, you know.
Yeah, but it's giving sci-fi.
Or dinosaur eats man and then women take over the earth.
Oh.
Love it.
Can't wait.
Jeff Goldblum. I'm just kissing my shirt right now. He's a beautiful man.
He's looking good.
All right. That was my book. I talked a lot about that book.
Well, we needed to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Now I can put that piece of my childhood on the coffee table.
Yeah.
Our shared read.
You do the honors. I feel it's only fitting.
I'm not even sure how to take that, but I'm taking it.
As a compliment.
I'm taking it. Oh, thank you, Ashley.
Your perseverance and your determination.
So obviously this is the Bad Ass Book Club Podcast.
And babes are here too.
Yeah. Ayo. So we chose
Melania by Melania Trump. Now, why did Katie pause? Because you know what? We just want to be respectful, and let's start with the facts, okay? She's an immigrant, and how she pronounces her name
Melania.
was a mystery, maybe. We did a little research.
Yeah.
We just don't want to get it wrong, okay? We want to literally put respect on the name.
Absolutely. I mean, she was a first lady, and she is now again currently. So let's give a little reference to the story. This was written after her husband's first term
Right,
and before the second one.
right.
So I think that in and of itself is really interesting when you read the book.
So topical, and I didn't even really know where we were going to land at the
Yeah.
end until we got up to, the shooting.
I know.
I was going to say spoiler alert, but if you watch
history.
Life, yeah, then you're aware of the attempt. But yeah, I was actually really, really pleased to see what the time frame was. I will
Mhm.
admit, and I guess we're jumping into it.
Well, here let's give it just a little bit of
Okay.
a
Yeah.
preface, because we know that there are lots of political opinions in our society. To be, yeah, it's about a conversation. I mean, how fortunate we can have differing opinions. But that being said, I have no political affiliation with this book, or I have no extra purpose other than I saw this amazing meme of all these faces that she was making, and I thought, well, that's badass.
It is badass. And I don't think, again, we're not going to get political and everyone has their opinions on whatever. This doesn't even have to be about that. This is about
Right.
a story of a woman who wasn't even born here and now has lived in the White House twice. Like, hello,
I know.
badass.
I thought the same thing. Now, obviously, she talks about her husband because it's her husband.
Right.
But I also thought it was refreshing to get that perspective, because this is her and her life, and I haven't really heard much of much from her,
Right.
other than some of the missions that she's had as the former first lady and current first lady, and some of the things that she holds dear to her heart. But there's been a lot of bad talk, not from her, but about her.
Right.
So I was curious, because there's a lot of people who are like, you talk bad about me, I have to tell you what is up. Like,
Right.
no way, I need to make a point. Maybe it's because I'm a Taurus too. But because of her reserved, I think, personality, I should say,
Yeah.
I was very curious to hear from her.
I was too. And I think, well, and if you read it, or you can just hear it from us, privacy is important to her. Her public persona, in a way, I don't know if it would still be now, but from reading the book, at one point was important to her as well. She talks about when she's going into the White House, what kind of image she wants to portray. And, we can get into the details of how that ended up working out. But the privacy thing, I think, is a big part of how she has presented herself to the public. So I was really interested to read this too.
Okay.
And get to know a little bit, at
Right.
least, what we could, what she had to say.
First and foremost, strong lady.
Yeah.
Strong woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of the preface, but we started to jump in. I think we should
Okay.
just go straight in.
Okay.
How'd you feel about it? There might be some spoilers, but I still think that the goal is we're going to share our opinion. You might have read it. I hope that you have. I would love to get some of some other people's thoughts on this.
I would too.
But most importantly, like, maybe what we share from this inspires you to grab a copy.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's an autobiography, so spoiler schmoiler, really. There are some things that I learned that I don't think I've learned from, like, let's say the news, but it's from the horse's mouth, if you want to put it that way. But one thing I do want to say is it wasn't easy for me to get into it.
No, and I love it. I love doing a podcast with Ashley. Just so everybody knows, I love doing a podcast with Ashley, because she literally. I just
said straight from the horse's mouth, so we're fine.
She's one of my best friends. I mean, you're one of my best friends.
We were just talking about it.
So the joint story is very hard, because I just want to call her up and be like, what do you think? And when I had a hard time getting into it, I just wanted to be like, oh, Lord.
Yeah.
This is going to be an adventure.
Yeah. I think there's two sides to this coin. You know, there were parts where I was like, we're never reading an autobiography again. Let's stick to nonfiction. I don't know. I'm obviously, I was going to finish it no matter what, but I'm glad that I did, because I will say that as I read, I was more eager to. As I learned, as I got through, you know, the younger years, I was like, okay, this is a story I want to know.
So would you say then that this might be one of those where you're like, you know what, not feeling it, put it down? You might be actually like telling people, give it a chance.
Yeah, I would say if you have no interest in this person and it's not for you, maybe leave it at that. But if you're curious about maybe opening some doors, just learning about a person, take away, you know, her affiliates if that bothers you. But let me just give you an example. So when I read this book, it made me want to learn more about other stuff. And I think that's a really fun part about reading, especially something that's nonfiction. It's like, okay, get through this, but like, where does that leave you? Like, I want to learn more about the White House. I want to learn more about the history of the place. I want to learn more about like what people's roles are there. She talks a lot about her touch she wanted to leave, and that was a really interesting part for me.
I thought so too.
Yeah.
And it was so humanizing. And
Yes.
I know that might sound strange because it's a book from a human by a human about a human. But you get these ideas of what people in these roles are supposed to be, or you know, not even just what they're supposed to be. Maybe you just have this perception based off of our culture or our society, or hearing it from parents or whatever.
And it can happen with celebrities or just anybody who's a public figure.
I mean, who's more of a celebrity, or if celebrity is someone well known, than the president?
Right.
Yeah. So, but it was like she shared intimate moments, like when she realized that her son was going to become the first child, basically, and that his life will always be different, and her experience as a mother going through that process. I mean, I think there are some commendable parts about how she supports her husband, how she cares and loves, and like their story is really interesting. But like you were talking about, knowing more about the White House and the process of like becoming the family, or getting into that position. And she sounds busy. Like, she's a busy lady.
Yeah. So that was another thing too that I found really interesting. It's just like she gives a little bit of a big bit of an inside scoop at the physical, like when we enter the White House, when the previous family leaves the White House, what my schedule is going to look like, what my staff is going to look like. It was really interesting.
And what my life is going to change into. Right. Because I think that's an interesting perspective. The story jumps here and there between her life and her memories. And, you know, I get the sense that she never thought she'd be the first lady.
Right. I definitely got that sense too. Just to give a little background, she does talk about before she came to the United States. And that was the trickier part for me to get through. Not looking back, not because it wasn't interesting, because I actually found it very interesting that she was raised in a communist country, first of all, and that what her perspective was, you know, it almost kind of seemed like it wasn't too bad, at least for her specific family. They made the best of it, it really seemed like. But just like jumping from that to her coming to the United States, she was already well traveled. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm scared of change. That was a huge theme of the book. She was determined to do what she wanted, and to get to those goals, it was like nothing was going to stop her. I thought
that was really interesting too.
Yeah.
And then you almost go, okay, well, I mean, once again, you can't separate her from her husband because that's her husband.
Right.
And one thing that she does very clearly say though is that something that's important to her is to respect the people that are in her life, including her stepchildren, but still being herself and having her own opinions and doing what she can to make the world a good place. And then the details of how she tries to accomplish that, I think, is important.
Right. And she does come right out and say too that she doesn't always agree with her husband, but she supports him.
Right. And I mean, I don't always agree with my wife, but I support her, especially if she's listening. No, always, always. I think that's really healthy.
Yeah, and it really does. I mean, I don't really want to make it a whole political discussion, but
Yeah.
it really does just, you get to see, at least, I mean, she wrote the book. So whether this is how she really feels or how she wants us to think, I mean, it's like the dinosaur thing. Where's the reality and where is the perception? I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it's like either she's building this character and this is the information she wants us to know, or this is how she really is. I think it's probably just human nature to be a combination of those things. But what I just found really impressive was that she is kind of like a no bullshit lady.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, she's done a few different business ventures. She made her way modeling. That's how she got to travel, just for anybody who doesn't know. But what I just thought was really, I don't know if I'm going to, it's not that, you know, she's a human being and whatever. She didn't really include the mistakes that she's made in the book is something that I've noticed, and that's fine. So what we did get to learn about her was that she was pretty badass.
Yeah. And, you know, I think this is also, it was interesting because she was going to be an architect.
Right.
Like
in school.
You have to be brilliant. Like
Yeah.
she was on this path. She's always, and even her perspective of modeling and how she got into, she's Abraham Lincoln. She's gorgeous. Yeah. I mean, I
think that is subjective or objective?
Yeah, both.
Well, no, but which is, I always get that confused. Objectively. She's objectively good looking.
Yeah. and it's interesting though, because she even talks about how like throughout her modeling, I think her mentality, she treated it like a business. It wasn't look at me, or at least this is the perspective she's sharing, because she knew that some jobs weren't for her.
Right.
Like they were going to pick others. That was only one area where I do wish that there was more. When you talk about, you know, not really hearing too much about failure, she talks about different failures. We all have failures and resiliency around those. But when she talks about modeling and how hard it was, I wanted more. Like just, if I was her editor I would have had her go in a little deeper and say, give us an example.
Yeah.
Like, were bitches like pulling your hair?
Right.
Or were they cutting your outfits behind the scenes? You know?
Yeah. You make a good point, because I was going through with an attitude of like, okay, I see that you're very determined. Like in retrospect, I can reflect on the book and I can say, okay, I'm happy I read it. But while I was in it, I was thinking, I'm seeing a lot of these same words again. Determined, resilient, you know, just these strong sort of words to describe herself. But it might just be like, I'm not dwelling on those things that didn't work out.
Right.
She really, now that you say that, she did put forward like, hey, I wasn't the best looking one here. I wasn't expecting to win. Yeah. It was a surprise to me that I did, or it wasn't a surprise to me that I didn't.
Right.
So you're right.
And, you know, to that point, I think that's going to be my catchphrase. To that point. If you guys are getting tired of it, let me know.
Or not.
But we had briefly spoken about her being an immigrant. Not only was it so formative to who she was, who she is, her thoughts on America, and how proud she was to become a citizen of America, which I think is interesting too. But this isn't her home, like not her foreign language. This isn't her primary language.
Right.
English, definitely you get that sense. And if you know people who are multilingual, sometimes it's more difficult to find those words,
right,
those expressive words, to then share
right,
the same concept.
Right.
So you might say those same words again,
right,
or you might not be able to. So I gave her a little grace with that.
Yeah, and I do remember thinking like within the first couple of pages, oh, I feel like this was written by somebody who is not a native English speaker, and sure enough, she's not. So yeah, I'm not going to hold that against her.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with that.
Oh,
it just
obviously,
just having that perspective kind of helps you, like, I think, get to where you need to get.
Yeah, exactly. And to that point, she's not like a renowned author either. She's a person who's writing a book about herself.
Right.
And I've read a lot of autobiographies, and when I was comparing it to one that I've really, really resonated with, it's by this child actress, Jeanette McCurdy. I won't say too much about it because, I mean, it's a really good book, but it's a whole nother story. I remember feeling a lot like she was really painting these pictures and just the way she was describing her emotions and everything like that. My point is that she's a writer. By trade. She writes for TV shows. She writes for comics. She wrote all her life. So, no wonder there's a difference there.
I'm wondering if you got the sense, because I got a sense a little bit that it almost was like someone could have been following her around a room saying, well, what are your thoughts on this? Or tell me about this part of your life. Like, it was almost like having that direction. I mean, maybe because of how it would jump around a little bit, but it was like these moments of deep clarity about a topic and then kind of shifting.
Yeah, I did get that vibe. And if you think about it, you've only got so many pages because you've only got so many times. So what are the points and the memories that stick out to you the most that you feel like you want to share as your sort of origin story or that define you?
And I do want to say there's a bit of vulnerability in the book.
Yep, that is true.
When we were talking about the badassery of her, someone might not have shared that. Like a first lady, I'm not sure that I've ever gotten that insight on those experiences or about someone's life like that. Maybe I need to read more autobiographies from the first ladies. But
right. Yeah, it is tricky to say without having something to compare it to. But I will say, I mean, you're going to be most vulnerable, I would imagine, when you're talking about things like your children, your parents, your husband, when you know that it's such a hot topic for pop culture and everything else. Right. Now that I'm saying it out loud, she's coming from a perspective of there's a lot of people who might just read this to hate on it.
Yeah.
So I could also see too where you're going to put up a little bit of a boundary, especially when that's already your personality. And if you look at it from that perspective, we got a lot.
Yeah.
So would you recommend?
I would recommend it. And I think the biggest reason is because of having the insight into the White House, but also because there's this beautiful moment she talks about her mom and her family. And for me, I love way too much the I like my suitcase.
Yeah.
And as I was reading her book, I'm hopefully everybody knows what that means too. I like my suitcase. It's a clip of Barron Trump when he's little, and it blew up.
Yeah,
it blew up, and I love it, and I thought it's hilarious. And then I watched a clip of her, and she was just talking about how when she looks at it, it's not making fun of her son. When she looks at it, it just reminds her of the sweet moment of her son.
Right.
Now, there's a lot of people making fun of it.
Of course.
And then so I started, after I read this, I almost had this moment of like, I still like the song. It's a banger, but I need to like it for the right reasons.
Right.
Because I caught myself being okay with making fun of somebody in a way. I know does that sound weird?
No, it doesn't sound weird at all. And especially somebody who's a kid.
A person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone's kid, I should say.
Yeah, exactly. Someone's kid, a person, and so I loved the humanizing of her, learning more about her journey. I mean, I love her independence.
Yeah.
I love kind of her thoughts on life and personal relationships. And then at the end, she talks about her own missions in the White House. Renovating
which
the White
were
House.
news to me, by the way. I wasn't aware of Be Best. Yes. I wasn't aware of that. I mean, I wasn't really paying attention at that time, if I'm being honest.
Right. Because we have our own lives.
Right. Exactly. But yeah, there was a lot that I took away from that I had no idea. And I would say was mostly for the better.
I do too.
Just her whole just like, this is sort of why I'm the way I am was really what I appreciated the most.
And it wasn't I'm making excuses for anything. It was exactly what you said. This is who I am, why I'm the way I am, and then the things that are important to her. And that gets so overshadowed, I think, in life and in our society right now. So yeah, it just was a good reminder to me to dig a little deeper.
Right.
Huzzah. Would I recommend it? Yeah, I think overall I would.
Yeah, I would recommend it too. And I would recommend it because am I a person who's like knocking down the door on its release date? No. Did I really know that it was out there? not exactly. But I'm happy I read it because it opened some doors to some questions that I'm going to look for the answers to now. More so just about how this whole thing works.
Yeah.
I was pretty impressed that she even mentioned Michelle's name a few times.
And it seemed
In a good way.
Yeah.
I mean, not like she was going to come and talk disparagingly
Besties.
about somebody or, But I just thought, I don't know. I thought those were windows into situations that I was curious
and
about.
relationships with foreign people
Oh,
too.
yeah. That was actually, I totally forgot about her travels and how
Yes.
she touches on talking to other wives of people who are in charge in other countries and the differences
Right.
in the dynamics of how they're received and
First
respected
ladies.
in their
Yeah.
communities or countries, and how different her responsibilities are
Right.
and her image.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting.
So without telling you what she says.
Right.
Now
There's a
you
lot
can-
to look forward to.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so
I
too.
totally
Make
forgot.
it to the end.
Yeah. And, COVID happened during that
Yes.
time. Obviously, an attempt on Donald's life is included.
Which I do want to talk about.
Okay.
Just briefly.
Yeah.
Because it's once again a different perspective. Could you imagine that the person that is your husband, wife, the person that you love, that
The father
you
of
know-
your kid.
the father of your kid, the person who has supported you and you've supported them throughout so much, you find out that they were shot at almost. You know what I mean?
And the way that she found out, which I won't get into because you can read about it, but she finds out, and there's some time where it's like, okay, I hear what you're telling me as Secret Service, but like, where's my husband? And it's just like watching that on TV
Oh my
and not
gosh.
talking to the person that it happened to immediately, and knowing that your son is also seeing this on TV.
Right.
It was a pretty crazy thing to read.
A mom-wife perspective.
Yeah, and human.
Human.
Human. Because you're not my mom, wife, or kid. And if that happened to you, I would be like, okay, Secret Service, get my chopper.
Quick segue. I still believe you could be president, Ashley. So.
Okay, thanks. That's something we'll talk about again in the future, but thanks for touching on that. It's always been a lifelong dream.
And now, if you've made it this far, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll be back to talk about at least 3 more books.
What do you got waiting on the back burner?
Okay, so I have a couple things that are sparking my interest, but I'll be honest, for our shared, I'm not sure. Do you have any suggestions? Not to put you on the spot.
I do, and let's just say it's from Ireland.
The girl has never been put on the spot in her life.
Have you read this?
The Lost Bookshop. No.
Okay. This was like a bestseller. I had peeped it somehow. Don't even remember how exactly. Let me read you the back. I mean, talk about a coinkydink. On a quiet street in Dublin, a lost... Hey. Okay,
Sorry.
take 2. A lost bookshop is waiting to be found. For too long, Opaline, Martha, and Henry have been the side characters in their own lives. But when a vanishing bookshop casts its spell, these 3 unsuspecting strangers will discover that their own stories are every bit as extraordinary as the ones found in the pages of their beloved books. By unlocking the secrets of the shelves, they find themselves transported to a world of wonder where nothing is as it seems.
I'm in.
Okay. I thought you might be, and it was kind of because of the March theme too.
Okay, cool.
But this author has had a few bestsellers. It looks like one of those quicker reads that you just, I don't know, the reviews have seemed really good. If you in the audience have already read this, please join us as we go on this journey. And in fact, I mean, what better than this little quote at the top? How far will you go to find your story?
Well, luckily I have Katie and I didn't have to go very far. But I'm really excited, and no slight against Melania. I'm glad we read it. I am happy to get into something a little bit more creative where we can talk about like light versus dark and this
Yeah.
and did you catch that? And,
Mhm.
it's just I'm excited to get into something that's a little bit more breezy, maybe, even if it's not breezy.
Yeah.
Nonfiction is where it's at.
I mean, really fun too, flying through the airport last weekend, going to Casa Bonita in Denver, Colorado. Shout out.
Please take a look at the video. If you're just listening, you need to just turn it off and go over because
There's this beautiful
look at this mug.
It's beautiful.
Okay.
It's beautiful. This was in the airport. I love looking at airport racks because have you ever?
No,
Okay.
but I've heard the trope of like
Yeah.
pick up a book, get on a plane.
This was one of them. The Lost Bookshop. It's been out for a little bit now.
Okay.
But this one was definitely on there. Also inspired by Ashley. This will be my personal read. If I can find it.
Okay, you guys. So here's the thing.
Wait. Tell 'em not everybody's seen this.
Well, I was gonna let you say. Go ahead.
Okay. It's called The Fourth Wing. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, New York Times bestselling author, Fly or Die. The New York Times bestselling author Tracy Wolff says, the most brutally addictive fantasy I've read in a decade! !
Okay, I just want to preface this quickly because we're running out of time, but I need you guys to know that I've never read one Harry Potter book. I've never read one Lord of the Rings. I've never touched a video game controller in my life. I'm just not to stereotype, but that's the kind of person I am. When I tell you that I read the first 2 of this Empyrean series, and just the universe brought me to the internet on the day that the 3rd was released. Like, I connect with this story, and I'm so pleased to see this book in Katie's hands. Now, if you're not watching and you have no idea what we're talking about, it's a long one.
Okay, like I said, this is going to be my slow burn.
Okay.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Okay.
One of the first things I asked Ashley was, is it sexy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I have to tell you the most fun, and then you can talk, because let me tell you, I had the neatest experience at Target.
Oh.
I was very loud in the aisle, and I was
alone.
Well, no, Casey was.
Okay,
with me,
good.
Kind of.
Okay.
No, Casey wasn't with me. No, she was. That's my wife. Okay, my wife. And I was texting you.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Because I couldn't remember the title, but I remember her recommendation. Ashley's recommendation was so strong for this book.
There's dragons.
I mean, for Ashley to say that, I'm just saying, I don't think it's relatable to Harry Potter.
I really hope you like it.
Well, let me tell you what gets me more excited.
Okay.
So I'm in the aisle, couldn't remember, and I'm telling Casey, I'm like yelling in the other aisle. I was like, I'm trying to find this book. Ashley said it was really good, blah, blah, blah. And I say, it's like the 4th, and this lady comes up.
Thanks,
she was
lady.
looking at books, and she goes, the 4th wing. And I go, yes. And she goes, it's right over here. It's really good.
Oh, I think I know what she means.
And I got excited. I genuinely got excited, because here we were having a conversation. I trust you. You have good opinions. But here's someone from the world, outside of my world.
But in Target.
Okay, so.
In my world.
In my world. And here she's talking about this exceptional book. And she was talking about how there's even a sequel, and the 3rd one's coming out.
It's out.
And I said, well, what do you think about it? And she said, I loved it. I read it so quickly. And then I said, my friend said there's some sexy parts. And she goes, oh, yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, I don't know if we want to go here, but do you want to age this person? I'm curious.
Our age.
Older, our age? Okay.
Yeah, maybe a little bit older.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm horrible with age anyway.
Yeah, it
so.
doesn't matter. I was just curious. I'm
No.
trying to paint the picture.
Yeah, she was 12 years old.
Okay.
She was 12 years
Gotcha,
old.
gotcha,
She was like,
gotcha.
you're going to love it. It's really sexy.
Okay, good.
I was like, oh, okay.
Okay.
No,
Well,
okay, God, that sounds really
no, it didn't. It reminded me of Game of Thrones when you
Yep.
said 12-year-old, because Arya's another badass.
Another badass.
And that's where my mind
I
went.
have a feeling this will be an easier read. I said, it was just really neat that all of that was happening together. And then going through the airports, this was top 10.
Okay,
on the shelves and stuff, so.
good. Well, I really hope you enjoy it. There's some, world building, but I feel like you'll like it. So,
And I'm pretty stoked, because between the 2 books, I think that the next time we meet, and hopefully if you guys pick up some of these too, we'll be on the journey. We won't be finished with the journey. We'll be on the journey.
that's good. And you know what? I've made an executive decision while we're sitting here. I'm going to read the Thursday Murder Club.
Okay. I can't wait to hear what you think about that.
I don't know who the author is off the top of my head. I'm sure Google or DuckDuckGo knows. So check that out. And yeah, I'm excited to meet back.
Oh my gosh.
I can't lie. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about the dragons.
I love dragons. That's pretty much wrapping it up for this week. Thank you for hanging in for our first episode. Promise it will get better, or at least weirder, or wonderful.
It's definitely going to get funnier. We were all about the books this time, so you guys know we mean business, but just hang in there.
Yeah, hang in there. I mean, you don't have, yes, please. That's all I got.
Okay.
My non-badassness is showing.
It's okay.
I'll work
Our
on it.
hour's up. Edit this.
Peace.
Bye, guys.
Peace.
Bye, guys.